There is no one who ever acts honestly in the administration of states, nor any helper who will save anyone who maintains the cause of the just. The globalist elite are, if anything, consistent. Their lust for power is unmatched evil, and their propaganda creates an endless sea of useful NPCs ready to spout the party line. One such NPC is University of Tasmania communist Kaz Ross, darling of taxpayer-funded far-left propaganda outlet, the ABC, and lover of cakes and pies. Commie Kaz has gifted us hilarious lines such as,
"And there's a very, very short pathway from anti-Chinese sentiment to neo-Nazis,"
as well as a slanderous piece regarding Gavin McInnes and his Proud Boys that triggered her enough to call me a failed journalist. This is interesting, seeing as I distinctly remember succeeding in every journalistic endeavour I ever genuinely attempted. She must be confusing failure with refusing to work for the dying, lying and corrupt lamestream media. Tomato, tomato. At any rate, I have responded to both of these and will link in the description. Today's video is regarding yet another piece of response fodder gifted to us by this accidentally generous fool, delightfully entitled, "How Believers in White Genocide Are Spreading Their Hate-Filled Message in Australia." It's what you'd expect from any high-ranking soldier in the globalist armies of Satan, devoid of facts and lacking any reasoned argument. It even fails to articulate the position it is attempting to counter, a recipe for failure, and fail it does. As the ruling class media are unlikely to publish any genuine response to her lies, it is up to independent individuals to hold her to account. It starts out, as these diatribes often do, by discussing events the ruling class don't like and making the predictable cries of neo-Nazi, a label that now means little more than anyone who expresses views the globalist left-wing ruling class don't like, and I mean really don't like, a lot.
Oh yeah, how much? A lot.
It's a badge of honour in a lot of ways, as it means you're getting under their skin. She gifts us a meme shared by the one and only Fraser Anning regarding the achievements of Western civilization. Clearly, he should know better than to express pride in what his ancestors have accomplished. He is white, after all. A wise man once said, "If you can't intelligently argue for both sides on an issue, you don't understand it well enough to argue for either." Not only does Kaz fail in this, she fails even to articulate the argument she is supposedly refuting. She writes, "So what is white genocide? The recent manifestation of white genocide has its origins in the American neo-Nazi movement. The Turner Diaries, a very influential 1970s novel by William Luther Pierce, posited a dystopian world in which white Americans were oppressed by non-white minorities at the behest of Jewish politicians. A righteous, armed resistance then takes back control of the world after a bloody nuclear war. Pierce's work inspired a spate of violent crimes, including the Oklahoma City bombing by Timothy McVeigh in 1995. It also led to the formation of secret groups, including the infamous and ultra-violent white supremacist group, The Order. It was an influential member of the Order, David Lane, who coined the white nationalist mantra, "We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children." White genocide adherents want to return to a so-called traditional way of life defined by the nuclear family and prescribed gender roles. They divide humans into separate races and see multiculturalism and migration as a threat because each race should be contained to their perceived homeland. Whilst an interesting history lesson that may or may not be true given this communist penchant for lies, this is not where the white genocide idea originates. It's true that a few people blame a certain group, but this is not core to the argument. The truth is, the idea of white genocide stems from the fact that non-whites are flooding white nations en masse, and this is a deliberate demographic replacement of white populations. Wide-ranging research and studies, as well as the words of the globalist elite, prove this fact.
African communities, Asian communities, Hispanic communities, and the wave still continues. It's not going to stop. nor should we want it to stop. As a matter of fact, it's one of the things I think we can be most proud of. So there's a second thing in that black box, an unrelenting stream of immigration, non-stop. Folks like me who were Caucasian of European descent, for the first time in 2017, will be in an absolute minority in the United States of America. Absolute minority. Fewer than 50% of the people in America, from then and on, will be white European stock. That's not a bad thing. That's a source of our strength.
Globalist rulers, including, but not limited to, George Soros, actively fund mass migration to the West in order to accelerate this replacement. Then there's the Coudenhove-Kalergi plan, a conscious and well-known plan to replace the peoples of Europe, adopted by the European elite and spoken about openly for decades. White replacement is real, it's deliberate, it's immoral, and it is a threat to all human life. Kaz the Communist even shares a meme that highlights the problem perfectly. Why is it that all races and ethnicities are entitled to their own nations, cultures and territories, but not whites? Never does she answer this question, and this is the question that most needs answering if she wishes to counter her opponent's arguments. No doubt, if she tried, it would go along the lines of imperialism, white supremacy, neo-Nazis, etc., etc., along with more claims made without evidence that we can safely dismiss. She continues, the most important goal of white nationalists, however, is the creation of a white ethno-state. This is a state that is presumed to have strong bonds and social cohesion due to a shared ethnicity or race, as argued by the evolutionary psychologist Kevin MacDonald. Some adherents go so far as to call for the removal of non-whites from multicultural societies, such as the US and Australia, to so-called ethnic homelands in other parts of the world. Here she fails to explain why this is a bad thing, nor why whites don't have the right to this. She just assumes that a white ethno-state is bad, and if you disagree, you must be a neo-Nazi. The gold comes in the conclusion that gets 10 out of 10 for both cluelessness and meme-worthiness. And I quote, "Why this theory is flawed and dangerous. How do Australia's white supremacists sidestep Australia's 60,000 years of Indigenous history? For the believers in white genocide, the term genocide does not refer to the impact of European colonisation on Indigenous peoples because they claim Australia only came into being as a nation with the arrival of white Europeans. Visiting alt-right speakers such as Milo Yiannopoulos, Lauren Southern and Stefan Molyneux have openly denigrated Aboriginal culture. This has supported a belief that there is no place for Aboriginal people in the white ethno-state." She mentions the White Australia policy but dismisses it offhand without acknowledging the fact that it is the reason Australia federated in the first place. Leaving out the fact that white replacement is a worldwide phenomenon that is occurring even where whites evolve naturally, a fact this communist conveniently leaves out is that Australia only became a nation after European settlement. Before whites arrived, there were no roads, no farms, no buildings, and no civilization. Most of all, there was no constitution that literally created the country. The very concept of Australia is European at its heart, and to deny this fact is an insult to those who sacrificed so much to build our great country. She even makes the hyperbolic assertion that ethnic nationalists all want Aborigines gone. This is not true, and someone should tell her that linking to communist websites as a source is usually a bad idea. Then there's the fact that many of the roughly 500,000 Aborigines even support the idea of their own ethno-state and self-determination. Who are we to deny them this right should they genuinely wish to give up all comforts and the welfare of the West? Nevertheless, her conclusion continues. Of course, the idea of whiteness itself in Australia has changed dramatically over time, and despite the claims of DNA testing companies, there is no scientific basis for race itself, and therefore for racial superiority claims. What I'd like to know is if there is no such thing as race, how could white Australians have committed genocide against Aborigines? Then again, she wouldn't be a communist if she wasn't capable of hypocritical doublethink. DNA testing can show with great accuracy a person's ethnic heritage. She dismisses this fact essentially because someone said so. Regardless of her wishes and regardless of her links to establishment websites claiming race doesn't exist because DNA differences are small, race is not a social construct. There are clear biological differences between races and ethnicities that are not just skin colour. These include differences in IQ, creativity, personality traits, and much more. To deny these differences is to deny nature and thus to deny God, but I guess that's the point. This does not mean individuals of one race have less God-given rights than others. It simply means there are differences and they are biological. Unfortunately, the current climate of hysterical censorship on this issue makes honest conversations very difficult. Name-calling and abuse are the inevitable result of even mentioning these facts. Finally, she dismisses her opponent's arguments without counter-evidence and without even citing their arguments as mentioned. She talks about the facts, but presents none of her own. And I quote, "Are white Australians at risk of becoming a persecuted minority? Hardly. Regardless, the white genocide theory is based on a flawed premise that only white people can be authentic Australians, and in multicultural Australia, the facts tell a different story. I can give her 6 million reasons whites are on the path to becoming a minority in our own country. Even if the number of non-whites is still low in most places, this is not the case for our two largest cities, and it is easier to stop a snowball at the top of a mountain than it is to stop an avalanche. As for multiculturalism, the facts do indeed tell a different story, to the ruling class narrative that is. Multiculturalism divides nations and reduces social cohesion. Monocultural countries are the safest and most peaceful. Australia's own multicultural experiment has seen the introduction of previously non-existent African gang violence, Islamic terrorism, ethnic enclaves, and an insufferably dishonest, tyrannically PC ruling class. If this is what our elites consider a multicultural success, let us pray the world never suffers its failure. So thank you to Kaz the Communist. We appreciate your efforts and the supply of what amounts to little more than response fodder. To everyone else, thanks for watching, share the truth around, and I'll see ya when I see ya.